Okay, so let's see. Here is our analysis video from Krita versus Brenden Karpov, game 1 of the tactical versus positional match 1. So I think Karpov won quite a nice game there with he sacrificed a knight for some passed pawns and some active pieces, and it turned out that he won a lot of passed pawns and won the game. Let's do some analysis of this. So I'll be sharing with you a human sort of insight into the strategies of the game, and we'll be using Stockfish 9 for blunder checking as well. Okay, so let's see. Here we go. So as we know, the game started off as a Nimzo Indian defense. That usually starts with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4, popularized by Aaron Nimzovich in the 1920s. And Krita played the queen c2 line. For an engine as aggressive as Krita, I think it would probably be better to play a less positional line, probably a3, or the Leningrad variation with bishop g5, or maybe even the Kasparov variation with knight f3. Queen c2 seems a little positional for me. Let's see anyway. So queen c2 was played, and okay, so castles, a3 takes b6, and this is sort of what's happening with the position. So Karpov has given white the 2 bishops, but he's going to be very solid. He's going to have nice control over these white squares in the center, and ideally he will be playing on the dark squares with his pawns, while his bishop controls white squares, sometimes with d6, knight bd7, e5, or sometimes with c5, and sometimes even with d5. Depends what he feels like doing. It depends on how he feels like playing the pieces, and also of course depends what white does. Bishop g5 was played, h6, bishop h4, bishop b7. By the way, for now, during the opening, it's a good idea to ignore. Maybe can I pause that somehow? It's a good idea to ignore the engine evaluation during the opening, because it generally doesn't understand too much. It's a little bit, the horizon's a bit too long, too deep. So f3, d5, e3. By the way, f3, of course, it looks like a weird move, but the idea is just to keep black pieces out of the e4 square, and perhaps even gain more space in the center with the e4. So d5, e3, knight bd7, knight h3. This might look like a weird move to you. Knight h3 is not so unusual though. The idea is to put the knight back to one of these squares where it's quite well placed. c5. And we see, as I said before, Karpov has given white the 2 bishops, but a lot of white's messing around with f3 and even knight h3, which needs to come back, has given black time to just play in the center like this. Meanwhile, white's king is still in the center, so white has to be a little bit careful that his king doesn't come under fire when all of these pawns start disappearing and the files start opening up. So c takes d5. There was a game by Macedo and Sousa Neves in Rio de Janeiro in, when was this? 2017. So last year, a game was played where white played d takes c5 here, and white went on to win against a relatively weak player. So c takes d5 was played instead. C takes d4. By the way, both engines were out of book now, right? If I remember rightly. Queen takes d4. e5. Queen d1. And this is interesting. So this position, there was a game played before. Up until now, the only moves that had been played was bishop takes d5 in this position. But Rodent Karpov came up with a novelty. This has never been played before, this move g5. And that's actually what Stockfish think is a pretty decent move. But they're roughly even, these moves. Stockfish Karpov just wanted to break the pin so that he could recapture on d5 with a knight, not a bishop. Because then the knight has immediate influence, like looking at the e3 square and things like this. So g5 is a nice little innovation, never been played before. And it might even be better, who knows. So bishop g3, I was a little bit skeptical about that move during the game, but it seems like there's no danger. Bishop g3, knight takes d5, and then now it's move 15, and I think black's doing okay. Queen d2. Yeah, during the game I thought white would have to play bishop f2 as well, but yeah, queen d2 is what Krita played. And now, after this is interesting. So Karpov played knight c5, centralizing the knight and threatening a fork on b3. But yeah, and this is the best move. So okay, knight c5. And so, yeah, we talk about the two bishops' advantage. In this position, it doesn't mean very much because white's behind in development a little bit, and these knights are just so good. There's the white king still in the center. The knights are creating threats all over the place, and black's going to be centralizing his pieces pretty quickly as well. And as we've seen in the game, e4 is going to come with some force as well. So bishop c4 was to stop knight b3, and Karpov played b5 here, which is still, yeah, it's a pretty good move. b5. This is basically it's a free tempo move. He attacks the bishop, and the bishop can't take because there will be a fork on b3. Stockfish thinks e4 is also good here, but I mean it's coming anyway. b5 is good, and then he plays e4, and I think that's a good move. The strategy that's going on here is that black understands that when your opponent has not very good development, whereas we see white is kind of stuck in the center here, you need to exploit it as quick as possible. And so the way to exploit white's bad development here is to try to open up the center. So e4 makes sense in that respect. And also, of course, white was simply threatening to take the pawn. So e4 makes even more sense. And now there's knight d3 check threats and things like this. I think, yeah, Krita made a mistake here. Probably, and Stockfish tends to agree, that white should castle while he has the chance. And there's no tricks here. He's got his king to safety, and he should really be okay. At some point, if white can stabilize the center, these bishops may become a pretty good fighting force. So castles, as we know, you should castle as quick as possible. Instead, Krita played knight f2, just trying to bring the knight back to the center, re-centralize the knight, defend the d3 square, and put pressure on the e4 square. So Karpov plays knight b6. That's a very interesting move. Again, Stockfish just wants to take on f3, which makes sense. In fact, why not? Yeah, Stockfish just seen a line that I was also thinking about. This variation here, because there's some issues on the e file. Why can't you just take on e3 here, and they have to take it more or less? Because if you get to go rook e8, he can essentially resign, right? So queen takes rook e8, bishop e5, right? And then just attack the pinned bishop. Okay, knight e4, logical. Knight takes e5, knight takes e5. Guess what? So this ends up about even, does it? Yes, sir. Okay, fair enough. This is the type of thing as a tactician I was looking at. Knight takes e3 here. But it turns out just to be even anyway. Maybe a couple of moves is even better. Knight b6. Knight b6 is quite subtle. I remember remarking about it during the game. The other option that Karpov was thinking about during the game was knight f6. Let's see what Stockfish thinks of that. Knight f6 just opens up this bishop here and starts getting ready to want to take down here. And I think that's also pretty good, regardless of what. But I guess Karpov's seen this line that Stockfish isn't happy about, and that's why he decided on knight b6 instead. Knight b6. Interesting idea here, queen d6. By the way, you might be wondering why white doesn't just swap queens. The reason why is something to keep in mind, that when you swap in this type of situation, all you're doing is giving your opponent the open file, right? So you want to kind of make them take you so that you can take back. So queen d6 is one way to do that. It kind of stops them taking you. Create a play queen d4. Which is not so good. Immediately Stockfish has spotted Karpov's piece sacrifice here. So he thought queen d4 is a nice move because we're attacking the knight, and if black takes and you take back, you gain a tempo attack in this knight here. But a rule to keep in mind is that when your opponent is threatening something, look for a way to see if you can ignore it. Now, don't always think defensively like, okay, I have to move my knight. First thing you look at, even if it's a quick scan, is you say, okay, is there somewhere I can ignore it? No, I have to do something. Then you move it. But if you can't do that, then you have to pretty much if you can't. If you can't do anything, you have to move the piece. But quite often, as Karpov finds here, you'll find a way that you can ignore it. In this case, he can ignore this hanging knight on c5 by playing e takes f3. And Karpov, Stockfish wants to just castle here because he sees the danger. Krita takes on c5 instead, and Karpov starts attacking. Check. As mentioned during the game, you can't play this blunder here, king here, because there's a fork on g2, and then a black is just winning, of course. This fork here is decisive, so white has to move his king to the center instead. d2, rook d2 check, king here, f takes g2, rook has to move, and knight a4, and what has Karpov given? So white has 4 pawns still, and Karpov has 2 pawns for his piece. But this type of position, as we can see, Stockfish just says black is winning. Might be hard for some people to understand how you can be down material and still winning. What black has as compensation for his piece sacrifice here is this passed pawn here can basically never be captured, so this white rook has to always be guarding it. This rook on the 7th rank is worth a whole lot, and it restricts white's mobility a lot. And this knight on a4 is very strong as well, putting pressure on here. But if the b pawn moves, maybe you can even go to c3 as well. And of course this bishop's very strong as well, and the rook is probably going to be following up. Meanwhile, if you look at white's pieces, they're kind of lacking squares, and it takes excellent play just to not lose immediately. There's a lot of ways you can blunder in this position as white. So white plays b4, just creating the pawn chain and avoiding losing the b pawn or the c pawn. And Karpov plays a natural move, just rook to the open file, with ideas of doubling up on this open file as well, or doubling up on the 7th rank, I should say, as well. Bishop b3 and rook d4. I remember during the game I had no idea why he played that move. And I still kind of do have no idea why. I get the feeling that he thought that White's only way of getting compensation was by playing knight g4 and hitting this, but also with ideas of knight here hitting this in combination with his bishop. So he just plays his rook d4 move, just centralizing the rook and keeping the knight out of g4. But I'm not sure it's so necessary to play like this. Maybe it is. It's funny. At first, Stockfish thought the move wasn't very good, but yeah, I think rook d4 was to stop knight g4, because if you played double up, Stockfish is saying that knight g4 is the move to be played. Right, so this is a case of Karpov, just as he did with his real style, just preventing your counterplay immediately. Even though it seems like there's nothing to fear here, Karpov, as we've programmed him to be human-like, just like the normal Karpov, he prevents White's counterplay before looking around how to improve his position a bit more. Okay, so knight d1. And yeah, I like the move that Stockfish is suggesting here, which wasn't played. Bishop f3, just get that last piece into the position onto an annoying square as well, where it might harass this knight here. This bishop f3 looks like a good move, but rook d3 is also good, of course. With d3, Critter tries to swap pieces with rook a2. And White plays knight c3. Look at those black pieces swarming around the king. This type of thing is quite unpleasant, right? Okay, so knight takes c3, rook takes check, king d1. And he swaps. And Karpov gets to grab another pawn. So he's got more, he's getting more and more pawns for his dark squared bishop, which is what he's sacrificed. Or which is what he's down, at least. And you start to get the feeling that the extra piece doesn't mean that much, because this pawn is now very weak as well. And this extra bishop here doesn't really have any targets, does it? Of course, there's some dream scenarios where it gets to like f6 and this rook comes around and checkmates you or something, but that's not really going to happen. So there's not really any targets for that that dark squared bishop. And meanwhile, Karpov's rook is extremely active, and it's just going to be chopping all of these pawns. And then his pawns will be running forward. So it looks like this piece sacrifice back here was very good. Bishop e1, even Stockfish gives it its approval. So rook a4, king d2. I wonder what would happen if you played this very passive move, bishop to e1. Ah, okay. That would be devastating. Just an easy win here. After rook here, pinning, and then no matter how the king moves, then bishop e4 wins the piece. So you can't even play bishop e1. So he's gonna win more and more and more pawns. So a5. And it's interesting that White is completely helpless despite being a piece up. These pawns are running, and pretty soon these pawns will be running as well. Probably here, and we'll see the way that Karpov decides to finish off the game. Bishop c7, a4, bishop a5, rook b2 check, king c3, rook b3 check, a3, and there's going to be there's passed pawns on both sides of the board now. Very hard to stop even with an extra piece. Bishop a1, king f8, a3, bishop c6, bishop c3, h5. So Karpov's getting ready with his h5 move. He's getting ready to create another passed pawn. Bishop c2, rook a3, bishop d3, h4. Now this is an excellent move. The reason why is because if you do g4 with the idea of h takes h3 and then this pawn just runs, then White is going to stop you off. He's not going to be so cooperative. Play g4, he'll just play h4, and you're going to be slowed down a little bit. Still winning, but you're going to be slowed down a fraction because these pawns are not going anywhere. And so this nice idea of playing h4 first is very cool, because Then you play g4, and he can't play h4. Even if he takes, then you play h3, h2. So bishop a1, g4, and this is time to resign. I mean, Stockfish already has it as -8 almost, and we can see why. If white does nothing, we just take here and promote, and if obviously if he takes, we just play h3. And so Krita decided to give a piece, and Glazed bishop takes b5, and Karpov simply took it, and Krita grabs that pawn, that dangerous pass pawn, but the game was adjudicated as a win already because it's very easy after g3, and it's time to resign. I think resignation would have come very quickly. After that, it's pretty easy to just win with bishop c6 attacking the rook, or even rook here, or even come and attack this and then promote here. You know, there's a million ways to win. So I think that's really good play by Krita. But what was his mistake? This is a 2800 level engine, right? Let's go back and see what his critical mistake was. The critical mistake, I think, that got him into hot water was not castling here. Trying to guard these two squares more quickly by playing knight f2, losing his castling rights. That's when he got into hot water. After knight f2, suddenly black is a little better. Up knight b6, very interesting move, knight b6, queen d4, and so this is another mistake. So two mistakes in a row, knight f2, followed by queen d4. 2 mistakes in a row is too much against a strong player, even though they're very subtle mistakes, right? And I suppose Krita had missed this piece sacrifice idea. E takes f3, check, and then black is just winning. And then Karpov's technique was flawless, essentially flawless up until the very end of the game. So that was a very nice game, and we can see Krita made 2 mistakes that were relatively serious mistakes, even though they don't look very big. But at this level, it counts. So that is the secret to this game. I would suggest you check out the PDF of round 1 now, and you can check it out over the board if you want to get a little bit of extra learning from the game. And otherwise, let's go and check out round 2.